In this section, we learn about configuring systems and data recovery on Windows 10 and understanding the components that really make up what is required to set up a data solution for Windows 10. We'll cover things like recovery drives, system restore, driver rollbacks, as well as using Device Manager, as well as OneDrive as a recovery option. We'll also talk about Windows Backup Admin and Windows Recovery. So there are a lot of different options you have when you're thinking about just data recovery on a Windows 10. And there are different ways you want to think about it. In this exam, this section, again, because the questions may not be ordered one by one, you need to be familiar with all of these different methods in case that question comes up on the exam. Now, there is more than one way to think about it. If I need to back up data on the local machine, what tools am I using to do it? Is it built into Windows, or is it an external tool that allows me to do that as well? Now, we have what we call the recovery drive. A recovery drive, in essence, is a USB media that can be used to basically troubleshoot or fix an issue against a Windows 10 system that won't start. We don't want to confuse this with, like a partition on a hard drive. This is actually an external recovery drive that can be used for, backing up your system data.
Exactly. You create a recovery drive by putting a USB in there. It backs up your system files to the USB drive, and you can boot up to that. And again, it's to find out what happened and to hopefully recover from that lost Windows installation.
Exactly. So think about recovery drives as a quick way to back up your system. And a lot of times, if you're looking at options and you're working with an enterprise, or give you a scenario from a business perspective, this is one of those options that may be the quickest way to get the system back up and running. It may not be associated with the recovering drivers, but it might be associated with getting the system back up and running fairly quickly. The other tool that you might want to think about using is a system restore tool, where you're being asked to do a system restore to a certain point. And this is typically something that gets configured on your device. You have to enable system restore, and then allow you to do things like driver rollbacks and as well as refresh of the PC itself.
Right. One thing when you reset this PC, and we talked in another video series about provisioning packages, and one of the nice things about reset this PC is it allows you to reset the PC back to the way it was factory. So not your custom employer's image, so not your corporate image, but back to the way it was at factory, and then use a provisioning package to put it back to the way you want it managed, the way you want it to look. So reset this PC does not give you the option of doing a custom image. It's always back to factory, and that's why doing something like a provisioning package really helps in that.
And the third option is a data recovery tool. Now, a data recovery tool, again, is something that allows you to restore information that's been removed or lost in your system. So we have file history that's built into Windows 10. And if you've configured it correctly, you can use locations like the library, the desktop, the contacts, and favorites, and have that information copied to a specific file location. And then file history allows you to revert back to an older version of a specific document that may have been backed up on a separate drive. And now, the other tools that are available are also OneDrive. We can use backup and restore.
So one interesting tidbit about OneDrive that a lot of people don't realize is there's a recycle bin in OneDrive. So if you delete something in OneDrive, you can get it back by going to the recycle bin. Whereas formerly, OneDrive, you deleted it, it was gone, right? So now there's a recycle bin, and you can recover your data, your deleted OneDrive data right from that recycle bin.
The next section goes into configuring an authorization and authentication. So this goes back to, how do I ensure that I'm logging onto the system securely? How am I making sure that I'm in the right network, on the right home group or any sort of settings? And what am I using for my Microsoft account? Yep. Now, although it has a lot of content in it in that section, it really just is intended to make sure that you understand the identity aspects of Windows 10. What is Microsoft Passport? What is Credential Guard? What is Device Guard? Now, we've spoken about this in several sections in the past, but the important thing to remember that each one of these are something that you will be tested on in the exam.
In the long and short of that big list is that passwords are bad, biometrics are good, right? Anyone can look over your shoulder and watch your password, or go onto your social media and guess what your password is, your dog's name, your kid's name, your birthday, but they can't use your finger or your face to log into a system, right? Passwords are bad, biometrics are good.
If you ever used Windows Hello, it also gives you options to do things like improved recognition. And Windows Hello, although it seems as it's a very simple technology, it takes your information and it literally hides your password or stores your password in a safe location using Microsoft Passport. And
so yeah, you can see here on my screen that I have my Windows Settings app open. I'm just going to type in hello because I always, as you know by now, I always type, I never actually browse. And I can set my face recognition or my fingerprint. And that's because I happen to be using my Surface Pro 4 device with a fingerprint scanner. If I don't have a scanner, that option is not available. If you can't see Alfred's face, he's amazed that I have a fingerprint scanner on my device.
It's kind of cool.
And
I knew they were there.
And it has my face recognition. So as I click on set up face recognition, it brings me to that same location where I can improve my face recognition or I can remove my face recognition. Now, why would I remove it? Or why would I improve it? One thing you notice you can't do is you can't add an additional one. So I can't say, okay, you can log in as me. Why don't you put your face there too? And if I go to improve it with your face, it's going to basically, I don't know what happens with my face as far as that's all concerned. Right? So I can improve my facial recognition. So if I have my sunglasses on, if I have a headset on, so I look a little bit different, it'll also catch me that way. And again, I can add another fingerprint. I've actually only done one finger. So if something happens to that finger, I'm going to have to register a new fingerprint at that point. So I may want to go ahead and add another fingerprint and get started and make sure it's you, enter my PIN, which is important to note that it always wants to make sure that the person doing this is the person that's logged in. Okay, touch the finger sensor. Great, touch it again. And I'm not going to go through, you have to do it 10 times. I'm not going to do that in this demo. But I would do that 10 times. If at some point it can't recognize my fingerprint because it's off to the side, it'll say, oh, touch it again. Can't figure it out, touch it again, right? It's not actually saying great or success. Oh, that one did, although that was just my tip. Oh, having trouble recognizing you, right? So it wants to make sure that it got it right. It's not just going to accept anything as you touch it there.
So for the exam, what do we need to know about fingerprint toucher?
So what you should know is that with Windows Hello, you can use a face or you can use a fingerprint. You can use even other biometrics as long as you have other scanners, an iris scan or something like that, third-party tool, or your computer can support it. And that if you register a face, an actual human face, a picture of your face won't work to unlock it. If you register a picture, a human face actually won't work to unlock it. It has to be 3D, 3D, or 2D, 2D, right? So I register my face, only my face can unlock that device. And a new feature in later versions of Windows that's coming out with the Creators Update, or if you've watched this sometime in the future, it came out with Creators Update, is Dynamic Lock. And what Dynamic Lock does when combined with Windows Hello, I'm just going to go to Dynamic Lock. No results for Dynamic Lock. Can you believe that? I'm going to go back to my accounts. I have to browse for it.
And we're giving you a little tidbit, even though it's not in the exam. It's nice to know what Dynamic Lock is.
Dynamic Lock may make it to an exam. It's not on the exam today. It probably, during updates, it probably will end up on an exam. I have no reason to believe that it won't be. So what Dynamic Lock does is it allows me to pair my Bluetooth phone to my device. And again, you don't need UAC. You don't need to be an administrator to do that Bluetooth pairing. So it allows you to pair your device. And when you walk away to go get a cup of coffee or to go grab a phone call or go to the restroom, as long as you have your phone with you, your device will automatically lock when it falls out of Bluetooth range. So that's a really nice feature because a lot of us do get up and go get a cup of coffee without hitting Windows L or without logging off or locking our system. This will automatically lock your system for you as you walk out of Bluetooth range.
That's pretty nice.
And then as you sit down in front of your computer when you come back, either your face or your fingerprint will automatically unlock you. Again, never enter a PIN, never enter a password.
So this is tied into the whole,
Yep.
Authentication, access, and protecting the user information on the device itself. The other area that we kind of focus on as well is the workgroup, the domain home group, and the Azure AD join options that you have on a Windows 10 device. Now, there are several options for adding a device to a domain. We have the ability to install a new Windows 10 image, and the very first time you install the image, it actually is added to its own local workgroup, meaning it's not part of an enterprise, it's not part of Azure AD, and you really can do just the same amount of work, except you're not going to be managed through group policy or any settings that you would see in an enterprise structure. The other option is you can have a domain joined, which is if you have an on-prem Active Directory environment, you can actually join your machine to that domain so that it can be recognized and utilized to access resources within that domain. It can also be managed through group policy or any other domain-specific settings that I can push down on that device. And lastly, you can also use Azure AD Join, which is basically taking the device and joining it to an Azure AD subscription that you or your company has subscribed to, allowing you to manage that device in the cloud as well, and be able to access resources that are available in that cloud infrastructure.
Now, what's interesting and what you should know is you can't be work group joined and domain joined. You're one or the other. You can't be domain joined or Azure AD joined. Again, it's one or the other. And you can see from my system, and I mentioned on one of the other video series, that I am Azure AD joined. And you can see that if I go to my accounts from my settings app. You can see Access Work or School. I am currently connected to my Microsoft Azure AD. Now, what that means is I'm getting whatever MDM we use Intune, whatever MDM policies are coming down to my machine, I'm being managed that way, not through group policy, through the standard group policy. So there are still things like my Windows Update settings and other settings that I can't change because my organization is managing those, but it's managing it through our MDM solution, not through group policy.
The other side of that is you also have the opportunity to do what we call device registration. And device registration allows you to connect a device to a specific domain. And if you're using Azure AD Join, you can do that. It's going to be registered in Azure AD. If you're doing domain join, it's going to be registered to your on-premise Active Directory. But ultimately, there's an object GUID that's associated with any device that's joined to a managed domain, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem. You have the ability to do what we call device write-back, which takes the information in Azure AD about that device that you registered with Azure AD and write it back to your on-prem infrastructure. And that allows you to use things like conditional access to access resources that are available for you in the on-premise network. You can also utilize that in the scenario where you're taking advantage of what we call single sign-on for specific web applications, because now it recognizes you as a user on a device that's supported and managed in the infrastructure as well. But you'll also need a web application proxy, you also need a DNS record, and you also need some level of Active Directory Federation services running to be able to take advantage of those opportunities for single sign-on.
Shameless plug. For information on those, visit our exam prep series on exam 7742, which is Server 2016. Shameless plug.
Microsoft accounts as well are something of interest in the platform. Now, there is a core difference as a Microsoft employee. When we hear the word Microsoft account, it gets kind of confusing because technically we all have Microsoft accounts. So we have to make a distinction. We call them corporate accounts. Corporate accounts are accounts that are identified with your organization. Ours happens to be the @Microsoft.com infrastructure. A Microsoft account, in terms of this exam, is referring to an account that has been registered within the Microsoft set of registered domains. Hotmail, Live, Outlook, MSN, any one of those, or even a Gmail account.
Yeah, even your Gmail account, your Yahoo Mail, those can all be considered Microsoft accounts or MSAs.
And the idea is that Microsoft itself, in using it for providing you access to applications that are either on-prem or in the cloud, it will automatically identify that user account based on the access rights and permissions that have been given to that account. And the Microsoft account is what basically controls that access. Now we can also then use that to synchronize settings across multiple machines. So if I'm Tom at hotmail.com on PCA and Tom at Microsoft hotmail.com on PCB, I can have those settings so that regardless of whether I log on to PCA or PCB, Tom's settings are allowed to roam between those two settings.
Yep, and you can see on my screen where I have my settings app up, and I went into my settings and then my accounts. You can see I have my MSA is my live.com account. And if you come down further down here to sync my settings, wherever I happen to log in a Windows 10 machine, and I log in as that same MSA, which is my @live.com account, all of these settings that I have set up will roam. And since I'm not using ease of access, it's something that I could, if I wanted to, I could turn that off. Individually turn off ease of access or Internet Explorer settings, whatnot. But sync my settings between the devices that I use every day. So any settings I set, I don't have to reset on the other device.
And this is important if you get a question in an exam that's asking you to understand how do I keep my data synchronized amongst a number of different environments or systems. You might want to make sure that the user has enabled their Microsoft account and then allows them to sort of use the sync settings across a number of systems. Configuring advanced management tools are also important, and this goes back to making sure that you know how to use the device manager and how to use Task Scheduler and a number of other tools that allow you to automate configurations on Windows 10. In this section, we talk about services, device manager, Task Scheduler, Windows PowerShell, and understanding what those services can provide you on any machine. Now again, keep in mind, these settings are also on Windows Server, but primarily for this exam, they want to make sure that you understand how you can control these settings using PowerShell and how you can access them in the Service Manager tool itself.
And you should note, and you can just see from the screenshot that we have up there, that you can set different logon properties or recovery properties on each service. If a service doesn't start, take a look at that logon, see who it's supposed to be logging on as, if it's set to a user account, specific account, or even a system account. So look at these services. Again, this is no different than what we've been doing with Server forever, but it's something that's tested in this exam as well. And especially, as Alfred said, the stop service, get service, set service, PowerShell commands.
So you can all control this through some sort of remote action to control, what settings are turned on and which ones aren't.
Yep.
In addition to that, we also have what we call the Task Scheduler. Now, Task Scheduler is nothing new to the Windows platform. It's just been enhanced, improved, and it has a much more refined look. And once you get into the Task Scheduler, what you're able to do is see things like user-defined or specific system tasks, and you can have things that trigger that action to run a scheduled backup, to run access to a specific update. You can do a cleanup of the device. So anything you want to put into a batch script.
You can see on my screen, I'm going to open my task scheduler again by typing, so schedule tasks. And I'm going to open up my control panel, schedule tasks, and here's my library. Microsoft, and we'll just say Windows. And these all have predefined, I didn't set up hundreds of tasks. These are predefined tasks that have been set up for us. And you go down to Windows Update as an example. And I can see what schedule start, or, I look at reboot or multiple automatic app updates. So open up any one of these to see what triggers it. Look at the actions or the conditions and take a look. And if I want to keep a history of this, which is disabled on this one, I can enable my history so I can know when the last time this ran successfully. And again, hundreds of tasks predefined, and of course I can always create new tasks as well. Go ahead.
The task automation with Windows PowerShell also gives you the ability to run task jobs. So if you wanted to do a new job trigger, if you wanted to do a register a scheduled job, you can actually find that file and actually run that to automate just the process of running a specific task. PowerShell is very important in this exam, and probably you'll hear us say it over and over again. Make sure you understand how to do many of these functions in PowerShell, because they will test you on whether or not you understand the PowerShell language.
Absolutely. And the way you'll see this on this exam is you'll see a portion of a query on one side and a whole lot of verbs and actions on the other side, and that you have to click and drag into the right location within that query to make it correct. And there's no partial credit. You get the whole query correct, you get the whole query incorrect.
One other thing I want to show you about the Feedback Hub is pretty cool. Joe, can you show us what that looks like today?
Oh, absolutely. So you can see I typed in Feedback Hub, and here is my Feedback Hub, and it's tied to my Microsoft account. And I can say I'm having trouble with Microsoft Edge. I can start typing in Edge, and it's going to give me some feedback that other people have given on Edge. And I can then say upvote, yes, I'm having that issue as well. Or nope, nothing there actually is what's going to help me out. And obviously I would look at more than just the top one. And I can then add new feedback. Edge crashed on me, whatever that feedback happens to be. Is it a suggestion or a problem? That's a problem. And it goes right up to Microsoft. And it actually goes to the right people at Microsoft. The Feedback Hub gets tens of thousands of bits of data every month based on your feedback. And sometimes it's the little smiley face that you see in the top corner of apps, and sometimes it's through the Feedback Hub. So again, give us more detail here, and by giving more detail, you can actually, here's the Edge crashed, and then I can say something like, when I went to a specific site, right? So you type in whatever the specific site is, Edge crashed. And then what category, again, so we know exactly at Microsoft who's supposed to receive this feedback. So give as much detail as possible in the Feedback Hub.
And one other thing we want to show is also just the recycle bin itself and being able to see data that's in your recycle bin on the OneDrive. If you ever delete a file on your OneDrive, there's an option to go back and recover data in the OneDrive. And it's just right here. Nothing majorly crazy about it, but it is available. It's available for about 30 days. If you delete something, you can just recover it using the recycle bin. So I think I like this because now I have not just one way to recover information, but multiple ways to pull my information back.
Absolutely. And as I said before, that recycle bin is a feature that's been there in OneDrive for several months, maybe a year or more. And most of us don't realize it's there. We delete something in OneDrive, and go, oh, can't believe I deleted it. But you can get it back again from the recycle bin.
Exactly.
And as you said, for a period of time, it's not there forever, right? Like your Windows recycle bin is.
And we'll go over a practice question with you. You are the help desk technician for Contoso.com. A user connects to her desktop each evening from home to run some reports. The user calls you to tell you that recently the report seems to be taking a long time to run. You decide to schedule the collection of the relevant performance data. Which tool below allows you to schedule the capturing of performance data?
Right, and we took a look at all of these: Resource Monitor, Task Manager. We talked about Performance Monitor, Event Viewer, and Data Collector Sets. So again, breaking this down, what I like to do with something like this is I make all 5 of these as true, false. Is it Resource Monitor? False, because that shows me in real time. Is it Task Manager? False, it shows me in real time. Performance Monitor, I can schedule some things. I think I can look at it in real time. I'm going to put a question mark next to that. Data Collector Sets, I know can allow me to schedule collections of specific pieces of data. And Event Viewer is just logs of errors and issues and warnings.
You can see over time what you want to change, but it doesn't give you
right, it's not going to allow me to schedule a collection of data. So in this case, the answer is D, Data Collector Sets. But again, as I'm breaking a question like this down, and some of you may think that was an easy question anyway, but as I'm breaking this down, I actually look at all 5 of those choices as true, false, and I put in my little grease board, false, 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 true, false, and then I mark it correct.
And again, the last portion of this is to make sure that you understand what tips to think about. We've talked about everything around backups and recovery. The primary place that you want to think about beefing up your understanding, tip number 1, is to use the Task Manager. So all the different recovery options between file level, OS level, understand each one of those and how to restore your data back to the system itself. And tip number 2, make sure that you know that you can actually roll back to a specific update if needed to. And so that works too. And watch for any of the required end results as you're going through the process. And tip number 3 is that know your tools: Performance Monitor, Resource Monitor, Task Manager. Know exactly which one is best for what function that you're trying to perform. And that way you'll do just a much better job at making sure you get through this exam without any problem.
Yep, I agree.
So this section really was important because now you have a better understanding of how to deal with backup recovery as well as maintenance. Anything that allows you to restore your data if for some reason you lose information. It's the last portion of the exam, but really hoping that you can take that and make that of value for you when you take the exam. Once again, thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the session.